The premise was set. A young boy, Ethan, consistently defied a simple instruction: sit down. His history teacher, Mr. Harrison, a man who prided himself on maintaining order and discipline, found this act of defiance increasingly infuriating. Each day began with a polite request, followed by a stern warning, and inevitably ended with a frustrated sigh as Ethan remained stubbornly upright. Ethan was in the 8th grade, a time when fitting in felt like the most important thing in the world. Yet, he stood out, quite literally. In Mr. Harrison's class, he wasn't overtly disruptive. He didn't shout or cause a scene, that he simply stood. His eyes followed Mr. Harrison as he lectured about the Civil War, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid. Mr. Harrison initially attributed Ethan's behavior to typical adolescent rebellion. He'd seen it all before: the eye-rolling, the mumbling, the blatant disregard for authority. But Ethan's case was different. There was no outward hostility, no challenging glare, just a quiet, unwavering refusal to sit. Detentions became a regular occurrence. Ethan would stand in the corner of the classroom after school, silent and unyielding. Parent-teacher conferences yielded no solutions to Ethan's parents, seemingly as perplexed as Mr. Harrison, tried everything from grounding him to offering rewards, but nothing seemed to work. The school psychologist suggested behavioral therapy, but Ethan refused to participate. The situation escalated. After a particularly frustrating week, Mr. Harrison, with the support of the principal, suspended Ethan for 3 days. The hope was that the time away from school would give him a chance to reflect on his behavior. But when Ethan returned, he was still standing. The administration, now out of ideas, began to see Ethan as a lost cause, a disruptive influence that needed to be contained. They began referring to him, in hushed tones, as the problem child. Little did they know, the real problem was far more complex than simple defiance. The label problem child stuck to Ethan like glue. Teachers exchanged knowing glances when he entered a classroom, and other students steered clear, unsure of how to interact with the perpetually standing boy. Even the school nurse, usually a beacon of comfort and understanding, seemed at a loss as she'd offered him ice packs, suspecting a muscle strain. But Ethan politely declined, offering no explanation. The principal, Mrs. Davison, a woman known for her calm demeanor and dedication to student well-being, scheduled another meeting with Ethan's parents. This time, however, the meeting felt different. The air was thick with unspoken frustration. Mrs. Davison laid out the facts. Ethan's grades were slipping, his behavior was disrupting the classroom, and all attempts at intervention had failed. She suggested a more intensive evaluation, perhaps even a transfer to a specialized school for students with behavioral issues. Ethan's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, were devastated. They loved their son and desperately wanted to help him, but they were running out of ideas. They'd consulted doctors, therapists, and even alternative healers, but no one could explain why Ethan refused to sit. They felt helpless, caught between their son's inexplicable behavior and the school's growing impatience. That evening, the Millers had a difficult conversation with Ethan. They pleaded with him to explain why he couldn't sit, promising they would do anything to help. Ethan, his eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and pain, simply shook his head. "I can't explain it," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It just hurts." His parents, seeing the genuine distress in his eyes, realized they needed to change their approach. They decided to focus on supporting Ethan, regardless of whether they understood his behavior. They vowed to continue searching for answers, but in the meantime, they would advocate for him at school and provide him with the love and understanding he desperately needed. This marked a turning point, a shift from trying to fix Ethan to accepting him and fighting for his well-being. But the battle was far from over. The school remained unconvinced, and Ethan's silent suffering continued, unnoticed by all but one observant soul. That observant soul was Old Man Abernathy, the school janitor. He was a fixture at Northwood Middle School, a silent presence who seemed to blend into the background. He shuffled through the hallways with his mop and bucket, his movements slow and deliberate, his gaze often fixed on the floor. Most students barely registered his existence, dismissing him as just another part of the school's infrastructure. But Abernathy saw everything. He'd been working at Northwood for over 20 years, witnessing countless dramas unfold within its walls. He'd seen students struggle with academic pressure, social anxieties, and the general awkwardness of adolescence. He had a knack for noticing the subtle signs of distress that others missed, the downcast eyes, the trembling hands, the forced smiles. He understood that sometimes the loudest cries for help were the ones that were never spoken. Abernathy had noticed Ethan from the very beginning that he saw him standing in Mr. Harrison's class, his posture stiff and unnatural that he saw him during lunch. Carefully maneuvering to avoid sitting at the crowded tables, he saw him leaning against the lockers in the hallway, his face etched with a subtle expression of discomfort. What caught Abernathy's attention wasn't just Ethan's refusal to sit, but the way he carried himself. There was a certain tension in his movements, a guardedness that suggested he was trying to conceal something. Abernathy had seen that look before, in soldiers returning from war, in athletes pushing through injuries, in people silently battling chronic pain. That he knew that something wasn't right. He knew that Ethan wasn't simply being defiant or disruptive. He suspected that there was a deeper reason behind his behavior, a reason that no one else seemed to be seeing. And he decided, in his quiet, unassuming way, to find out what it was. His years of experience had taught him that sometimes the most important discoveries are made not in the classroom or the principal's office, but in the quiet corners of the school, by those who take the time to truly observe. Abernathy's investigation began subtly. He started by simply being present in Ethan's vicinity, not intrusively, but in a way that allowed him to observe without drawing attention. He'd linger near the lockers during passing periods. Watching Ethan navigate the crowded hallways, he'd position himself near the cafeteria entrance, observing how Ethan carefully selected his lunch and how he leaned against the wall while eating, avoiding the chairs that he noticed. The way Ethan walked, a slightly stiff gait that suggested he was compensating for some kind of discomfort. He saw him wince subtly when he bent down to pick up a dropped book. He observed how Ethan always chose to stand at the back of the classroom, near the wall, as if needing something to lean on. Abernathy also paid attention to Ethan's interactions with other students. That he noticed that Ethan rarely participated in group activities that involved sitting on the floor or playing active games. That he seemed withdrawn, almost isolated, as if he were afraid of drawing attention to himself. One day, Abernathy saw Ethan struggling to carry a heavy stack of books. He offered to help, and as he took the books from Ethan, he felt the boy flinch slightly. Abernathy's keen eyes caught a fleeting expression of pain on Ethan's face. It was a small detail, but it confirmed his suspicions. Ethan's refusal to sit wasn't about defiance. It was about pain. Abernathy knew he had to proceed cautiously. That he didn't want to frighten Ethan or make him feel like he was being watched. He also knew that he couldn't simply confront Ethan directly. He needed to build trust, to create a safe space where Ethan felt comfortable sharing his story. He decided to start by sharing a little bit of his own. That he knew that sometimes the best way to help someone open up is to open up yourself. The next step was to find the right moment, the right opportunity to connect with Ethan on a personal level. Before Abernathy could find that opportune moment, it's crucial to understand where his unusual perceptiveness stemmed from. He wasn't just an ordinary janitor. He possessed a history that had honed his observational skills to an extraordinary degree. Before the mop and bucket, before the quiet anonymity of Northwood Middle School, Abernathy was a medic in the Vietnam War. That he'd seen horrors that no one should ever witness. But he'd also learned invaluable lessons about the human body and the resilience of the human spirit. He'd been trained to identify injuries, illnesses, and psychological trauma with a speed and accuracy that bordered on the uncanny. He could spot a hairline fracture from a subtle shift in someone's gait, diagnose dehydration from the color of their lips, and detect the onset of PTSD from the slightest tremor in their voice. The war had left its scars, both visible and invisible. He carried the weight of lost comrades and the memories of unimaginable suffering. But it had also given him a unique perspective on life, a deep appreciation for the fragility of the human form and the importance of compassion. After returning home, Abernathy struggled to readjust to civilian life. The noise and chaos of the city were overwhelming, the indifference of strangers jarring. He found solace in the quiet routine of janitorial work, the simple act of cleaning and maintaining a space, providing a sense of order and purpose. He chose Northwood Middle School, because he liked being around young people, that he believed in the power of education and the potential of every child. He saw his role as more than just cleaning floors and emptying trash cans. He saw himself as a guardian, a silent protector of the students who walked through the school's doors each day. His past as a medic had instilled in him a deep sense of responsibility for the well-being of others, a responsibility that extended far beyond the battlefield. It was this ingrained sense of duty, combined with his finely tuned observational skills, that compelled him to help Ethan. That he knew, perhaps better than anyone, that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with weapons, but with empathy and understanding. The opportunity Abernathy was waiting for presented itself after gym class. Abernathy was mopping the hallway outside the locker rooms when he saw Ethan emerge, his face pale and his breathing shallowed. He was clutching his lower back, his movements even more labored than usual. It was clear that the physical exertion had taken a toll. Ethan didn't notice Abernathy at first. He was focused on simply making it to the nearest wall, where he leaned heavily, closing his eyes as if trying to block out the pain. Abernathy watched him for a moment, his heart aching with sympathy. He could see the boy was struggling, silently enduring a level of discomfort that would have most adults reaching for medication. As Ethan slowly straightened up, he finally noticed Abernathy standing nearby. A flicker of embarrassment crossed his face. He quickly tried to compose himself, forcing a weak smile. "Just a little tired," he mumbled, his voice strained. Abernathy nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. He didn't push, didn't pry. He simply offered a silent acknowledgement of Ethan's pain. "Gym class can be tough," he said softly, his voice gentle and reassuring. "Especially on a hot day." Ethan hesitated for a moment, as if considering whether to say more. Then, he seemed to decide against it. "Yeah," he said, his voice barely audible. "Tough." Abernathy knew that he had to tread carefully. He didn't want to scare Ethan away or make him feel like he was being interrogated. But he also knew that this was his chance to break through the boy's wall of silence. He decided to take a small risk, to offer a glimpse of his own vulnerability in the hopes that Ethan would reciprocate. "You know," he said, his voice low and confidential, "I used to have back problems myself. Army days, lifting heavy equipment. It can really take a toll on a body." He paused, giving Ethan a chance to respond. "Sometimes," he continued, "it's not just about being tired. Sometimes, it's something more." The ball was now in Ethan's court. Ethan looked at Abernathy, his eyes searching, trying to gauge the janitor's sincerity. He'd always been wary of adults, especially those in positions of authority. They seemed quick to judge, quick to label, and slow to listen. But there was something different about Abernathy, a quiet understanding that seemed to radiate from him. He hesitated for a long moment. Then finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. It's not just gym class," he admitted, his gaze fixed on the floor. "It's all the time." Abernathy nodded slowly, his expression encouraging. "Does it hurt when you sit?" he asked gently. Ethan flinched slightly, as if the question itself caused him pain. "Yeah," he said, his voice cracking. "It really hurts." Abernathy remained silent, allowing Ethan to gather his thoughts. He knew that the boy was on the verge of sharing something deeply personal, something he'd been holding inside for a long time. He didn't want to interrupt the flow, didn't want to risk scaring him off. After a moment, Ethan continued, his voice trembling. "I've tried to tell people," he said, his eyes welling up with tears. "But they don't believe me. They think I'm just trying to get attention, or that I'm making it up." Abernathy felt a surge of anger towards those who had dismissed Ethan's pain. That he knew how damaging it could be to have your suffering invalidated, to be told that your experiences weren't real. "I believe you, Ethan," he said firmly, his voice filled with conviction. "I can see that you're hurting." Ethan looked up at Abernathy, his eyes wide with surprise. It was clear that he wasn't used to being believed, wasn't used to being taken seriously. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for believing me." Abernathy had successfully built a bridge of trust. Now, the real work could begin. With the ice finally broken, Ethan, still hesitant but now willing, began to confide in Abernathy. That he explained that the pain had started gradually, a dull ache in his lower back that he initially dismissed as growing pains. But over time, The pain had intensified, becoming a constant, throbbing presence that made sitting unbearable. He described the sharp, stabbing sensations that shot down his legs when he tried to sit for more than a few minutes. He talked about the sleepless nights, the constant fatigue, and the growing sense of isolation. He explained how he'd tried to tell his parents, his teachers, even the school nurse, but no one seemed to understand. They'd suggested stretching exercises, over-the-counter pain relievers, and even a visit to a therapist, but nothing had worked. "They think it's all in my head," Ethan said, his voice filled with despair. "They think I'm just making it up to get out of class." Abernathy listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and support that he didn't interrupt, didn't judge. He simply allowed Ethan to unburden himself, to release the pent-up emotions that he'd been carrying for so long. Ethan also confessed his biggest fear, that he would be labeled a faker, an attention seeker, someone who was trying to manipulate others for his own gain. He worried that his friends would turn against him, that his teachers would lose patience, and that his parents would eventually give up on him. Abernathy reassured him that he wasn't a faker, that his pain was real, and that he deserved to be taken seriously. He promised to do everything he could to help him find answers and get the support he needed. He explained that sometimes medical conditions could be difficult to diagnose, especially in young people. That he shared stories of soldiers he'd treated in Vietnam who had suffered from invisible injuries, conditions that were often overlooked or misdiagnosed. That he emphasized that Ethan wasn't alone and that there was hope for a better future. The confession was a turning point for Ethan. Abernathy, true to his word, began to explore avenues for getting Ethan the help he needed. He knew that navigating the healthcare system could be a daunting task, especially for a teenager and his already overwhelmed parents. He remembered the frustrating bureaucracy he had encountered when trying to get medical care for his fellow soldiers after the war. That he was determined to shield Ethan from that same experience. He started by making some phone calls. That he contacted old Army buddies, some of whom had become doctors and specialists. He explained Ethan's situation, emphasizing the boy's genuine suffering and the lack of a proper diagnosis. He leveraged his connections, pulling on every favor he could. Determined to find someone who would listen and take Ethan's case seriously, he faced numerous obstacles along the way. Many doctors were hesitant to take on a new patient without a referral from a primary care physician. Others were skeptical of Ethan's symptoms, dismissing them as psychosomatic or attention-seeking behavior. But Abernathy persevered, refusing to give up on Ethan. Finally, after weeks of relentless effort, he found a specialist, a renowned orthopedic surgeon with a particular interest in spinal conditions. Dr. Ramirez had a reputation for being compassionate and thorough, and she was willing to see Ethan despite the lack of a formal referral. Abernathy personally drove Ethan and his mother to the appointment, navigating the confusing hospital parking lot and ensuring they arrived on time. He waited patiently in the waiting room, offering Mrs. Miller words of encouragement and support. That he knew that this appointment could be a turning point, a chance for Ethan to finally get the answers he desperately needed. His efforts were a testament to his commitment. The appointment with Dr. Ramirez was thorough and comprehensive. She listened attentively to Ethan's description of his symptoms, asking detailed questions about the onset, duration, and intensity of his pain. She conducted a series of physical examinations, carefully assessing his posture, range of motion, and reflexes. She ordered a battery of tests, including X-rays, MRIs, and blood work, to rule out any underlying medical conditions. Days later, the results came back. Dr. Ramirez called Ethan and his parents into her office to discuss the findings. The diagnosis was a rare spinal condition called facet joint syndrome, a degenerative disorder that caused chronic inflammation and pain in the facet joints of the lower back. These joints, located between the vertebrae, allowed for flexibility and movement of the spine. In Ethan's case, the cartilage in these joints had deteriorated, causing bone-on-bone friction and intense pain, especially when sitting. The diagnosis was a revelation. It validated Ethan's experience, confirming that his pain was real and not simply all in his head. It also provided a path forward, offering hope for treatment and pain relief. Ethan's parents were overwhelmed with relief. They had spent months searching for answers, feeling helpless and frustrated. Dr. Ramirez's diagnosis finally gave them a sense of direction and a renewed sense of hope. Ethan, too, felt a wave of relief wash over him. He was no longer a problem child, a faker, or an attention seeker. He was a young man with a legitimate medical condition, a condition that could be treated and managed. He finally had a voice, a reason for his suffering, and a chance to reclaim his life. The diagnosis, though difficult, was also liberating. It marked the beginning of his journey towards healing. Now armed with the diagnosis, Abernathy becomes an advocate for Ethan with the school, requesting accommodations like a standing desk and modified gym activities. That he faces initial resistance, especially from Mr. Harrison, the history teacher, who views the standing as disruptive. Abernathy uses his past experiences and appeals to Harrison's compassion. Mr. Harrison, despite his initial reservations, agreed to allow Ethan to use a standing desk in his classroom on a trial basis. Abernathy, with the help of the school's maintenance staff, quickly installed the desk before the start of the next school day. The change was immediate and profound. Ethan, no longer forced to endure the excruciating pain of sitting, was able to focus on his lessons with newfound clarity. He participated more actively in class discussions, his hands shooting up to answer questions, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. His grades began to improve, and his overall demeanor brightened. Mr. Harrison, initially skeptical, was amazed by the transformation. He observed Ethan carefully, noticing the genuine relief on his face and the increased engagement in his work. He realized that he had misjudged Ethan, that his refusal to sit wasn't about defiance, but about survival. He began to see Ethan in a new light, not as a problem child, but as a resilient young man who was battling a hidden illness. He started to offer him extra support, checking in with him regularly and providing him with additional resources to help him succeed. One day, after class, Mr. Harrison approached Ethan. "I want to apologize," he said sincerely. "I didn't understand what you were going through, and I'm glad you're finally getting the help you need." Ethan, touched by Mr. Harrison's words, smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," he said. "It means a lot." The standing desk wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of understanding, acceptance, and support. It was a testament to the power of empathy and the importance of looking beyond outward behavior to uncover hidden truths. It was also a turning point in Mr. Harrison's own perspective, transforming him from a skeptic into an ally. Word of Ethan's diagnosis and the accommodations he was receiving spread quickly through the school. Initially, some students were curious, even skeptical. They whispered behind his back, wondering if he was getting special treatment. But as they observed Ethan's improved focus and his willingness to participate in class, their attitudes began to change. Mr. Harrison, now a staunch advocate for Ethan, took the time to explain facet joint syndrome to his students. He emphasized that Ethan wasn't trying to get out of work. He was simply managing a chronic pain condition. That he encouraged them to be understanding and supportive. Other teachers followed suit, incorporating lessons on empathy and disability awareness into their curriculum. They discussed the importance of looking beyond outward appearances and recognizing that everyone faces their own unique challenges. The school nurse, who had previously dismissed Ethan's complaints, apologized to him for not taking his pain seriously. She vowed to be more attentive to students' concerns in the future. Even some of the students who had previously teased Ethan for standing began to show him compassion. They offered to carry his books, held doors open for him, and included him in their social activities. They realized that they had misjudged him, that his refusal to sit wasn't about being different, but about coping with pain. The school community, once divided by misunderstanding and judgment, began to unite in a spirit of empathy and support. Ethan's story became a catalyst for change, transforming Northwood Middle School into a more inclusive and compassionate environment. The change extended beyond Ethan. Ethan's treatment plan involved a combination of physical therapy, pain medication, and lifestyle modifications. He began attending physical therapy sessions 3 times a week, working with a therapist to strengthen his back muscles and improve his posture. He also started taking medication to manage the inflammation and pain in his facet joints. Over time, Ethan began to experience gradual pain relief. He started sitting for short periods, first for a few minutes at a time, then gradually increasing the duration as his pain tolerance improved. He learned to listen to his body, to recognize the warning signs of overexertion, and to adjust his activities accordingly, he continued to use the standing desk in his classrooms. But he also began to experiment with sitting in a specially designed ergonomic chair for short periods. He found that alternating between standing and sitting helped to reduce his pain and improve his overall comfort. The journey wasn't easy. There were setbacks along the way. Days when the pain was worse than others. Days when he felt discouraged and frustrated. But with the support of his family, his friends, his teachers, and Abernathy, he persevered. Slowly but surely, Ethan began to regain control of his life. He started participating in activities that he had previously avoided, such as playing basketball with his friends and going on hikes with his family. He felt a renewed sense of hope and optimism. He also became an advocate for others with chronic pain conditions. He shared his story with other students, encouraging them to seek help and to never give up hope. He learned that his experience could be used to inspire and empower others, to make a positive difference in the world. Ethan's long journey was coming to fruition. Years passed. Ethan graduated from Northwood Middle School and went on to high school, where he continued to thrive academically and socially. He remained an advocate for disability awareness, sharing his story with other students and encouraging them to speak out about their own challenges. Abernathy continued to work at Northwood, quietly, observing the students, always ready to offer a listening ear or a helping hand. He became a mentor to many, a trusted confidant who understood the struggles of adolescence. One day, Ethan returned to Northwood to visit Abernathy. He was a young man now, tall and confident, his eyes sparkling with gratitude. He found Abernathy mopping the hallway outside the library, just as he had been years before. "Abernathy," Ethan said, his voice filled with warmth. "It's good to see you." Abernathy looked up, his face lighting up with a smile. "Ethan," he said, "look at you, all grown up." Ethan approached Abernathy and extended his hand. "I just wanted to thank you," he said, "for everything. You changed my life." Abernathy shook Ethan's hand warmly. "You did all the work, Ethan," he said modestly. "I just pointed you in the right direction." "No," Ethan insisted. "You believed in me when no one else did. You saw past my behavior and recognized that I was hurting. You gave me hope when I had none." Abernathy smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "all it takes is one person to believe in you to make all the difference." Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with emotion. "You were that person for me," he said, "and I'll never forget it." The two shared a moment of comfortable silence, a testament to the bond they had forged. Ethan's story rippled through Northwood Middle School for years to come. Abernathy, though he never sought recognition, became a local legend. His keen observational skills and quiet empathy were celebrated, and he was often consulted by teachers and administrators when students exhibited unusual or challenging behaviors. The school established a student support fund in his name, providing resources for students with invisible disabilities and chronic illnesses. The school nurse, forever changed by her experience with Ethan, became a fierce advocate for student well-being. She implemented new screening procedures to identify students who might be suffering from undiagnosed medical conditions. She also organized workshops for teachers and parents on the importance of empathy and understanding. Mr. Harrison, transformed by his interaction with Ethan, became a champion for inclusive education. He incorporated lessons on disability awareness into his curriculum and encouraged his students to challenge their own biases and prejudices. He often shared Ethan's story, reminding his students that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Northwood Middle School became a model for other schools in the district, a place where students with invisible disabilities felt supported, understood, and valued. The transformation was a testament to the power of empathy, understanding, and the importance of looking beyond outward behavior to uncover hidden truths. And Abernathy? He continued to walk the halls of Northwood, his mop and bucket in hand, a silent guardian, a quiet observer, always ready to offer a listening ear and a helping hand. That he knew that there were always more students like Ethan out there, students who needed someone to believe in them, someone to see past their struggles, someone to give them hope. And he was determined to be that someone. His legacy lived on.